Welcome to Champion Your Culture, the podcast, a weekly live show where we explore the power of culture and leadership in business. I'm Ryan McCarty.
And I'm George Rogers, and we go live every week to learn from each other and hear from other experts about how to effectively champion our team members and ourselves. So join us live every Wednesday on our social networks or subscribe. You can listen to Apple, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Now, let's champion your culture.
You ready to champion our culture, George?
Let's do it, man. Welcome everybody again to Champion Your Culture, the podcast. Yeah. We are live.
We are live, and I was going to say we're alive and thriving, but I was trying to rhyme it. So then it turned to we're living and thriving. Not good.
Let it go. Just let it go. It's early in the morning. On your first cup of coffee. It's been
the first one.
Yes, it's been a long morning. You've had an interesting, long, restless kind of week. You've had a lot going on
for an entire week. So yeah, Brenna, our youngest daughter's great news was selected, as I think I mentioned last week or the week before, to have her art piece in the airport. So that had to be installed, which meant she had to be there from midnight to 4 or 5 every morning. And so of course we wanted to be there as a part of this is a major thing. It's a forever piece.
First permanent piece in 15 plus years.
50.
Yeah.
Jeez. This is it. And it's a permanent piece. It's a lifetime piece for her. And awesome. It's going to be there when she's older in years, and it's really cool, man. So it's like a legacy piece. And then unfortunately, our oldest daughter had a loss in the family with her bio dad. So really tough, this dichotomy of celebration and pain. But you know what? That sense of belonging as a family, we were able to do both. Yeah. And that I think is a powerful idea as we talk about what it means to find belonging. When you find a real sense of belonging, people are going to be there through the ups, downs, celebrations, triumphs, and even the difficult stuff, And I know a lot of our listeners have been through triumphs over this last year and the difficult stuff. And it's really important to find that belonging, not just not just at work, but just in life, right? All around, having a sense of belonging in the workplace is important, but being able to leave work and have some people that know you outside of work is kind of nice too.
Yeah. Yes. It's definitely a balance to take and separate, in a sense, the work title and the being that you truly are. Yeah. Right. And so sometimes we just go through life. And I always challenge and encourage people to grow through it. Let's grow through things that we face on a day-to-day. Yeah. Nothing's perfect. Right. But we can find some beauty in all the pain and celebrate some of that life moments. And so I've been there, especially in this month in the season. Yeah. Difficult time for you. There's always some difficulties out there. And so we want to shout out to all our listeners out there that we're human. Everybody's human, just like you. Yeah. We have the roller coaster of life, the uncertainties, but there's some celebration.
Every once in a while we're human. Other days we're just perfect beings. Everything rides so smooth around here. Right. Technology always works. Life always works. You know how it is, guys. It's always the sun's always shining over here in Indiana.
The sun will always rise. Hey, shout out to Indiana. Yeah. For the whole year. Yeah. Including last winter. So, over a year, I've been saying, Mother Nature has been locked in a room somewhere, and it's been Father Nature. The weather has been very moody, like us men can be at times. Yeah. Father Nature's taking over. But I want to shout out to whoever's controlling the weather. I was struggling moving from the South, coming back here home to Indiana, but I have not seen snow yet.
Winter is coming.
I know it is, but let's enjoy this 40, 50 degree summer weather that I have brought to the good state of Indiana. Yeah. I want to say you're welcome.
Yeah.
that I have brought such good vibes.
Oh yeah.
And we haven't had a lot of rain.
We're not gonna say thank you till March.
You know,
because we don't.
It's going to be a long winter. They said it's going to be a late and long winter, and maybe I can find myself with our guest that's coming up today.
Yeah, I want to bring Ben in. Is that cool? Do you want to introduce him, or
let's talk about his weather, because I guarantee you he's enjoying a lot more weather than I am right now.
All right, let's go ahead and.
Awesome. Let's bring Ben in.
All right. Yeah. Here's Ben. All right.
Yo. Ben, welcome. Welcome, my friend.
I'm the weatherman.
Oh yeah. This is the weather.
This is the
No. It is 78 degrees today, I think, in LA. So.
Oh goodness, man.
We're still happy to have all you Indianans out here. So
78 and foggy.
Yeah, 78 and foggy, that's right.
That is awesome. Well, Ben is a good friend of mine. I met some of his team at a conference a few months ago and had a good conversation with him with HR Tech Tech Talks with Ben Eubanks and Lighthouse Research. And I was like, man, I got to have you on Culture, Champion Your Culture podcast with me and my good friend Ryan. Ben, for our audience and those who have not heard about FAMA and even who you are, can you give us like a brief description of yourself and then tell us a little bit about your company? And don't tell us why it started yet. I want to save that a little bit, but just a little bit of background about what your company does.
Yeah, sure. So thanks again for having me, guys, and really a pleasure to be on this morning. I'm Ben Mones. I'm the CEO and founder of a company called FAMA. We are a software company in the candidate screening space. And really what we do is help companies really get a sense of who somebody's going to be when they join, how they're going to act around employees, how they're going to act around customers. And we do it by plugging end users, HR users into the world's richest data stream, which is our online persona and digital identity. So, really helping companies identify everything from signs of potential workplace misconduct, as might be construed through the online record, or as some of the stuff we're working on now, getting a sense of a person's professional traits and competencies from that same data stream. So yeah, really this world of online screening is what we do. We've been doing it since 2015. And we're excited to be here and talk about it today.
That's awesome. I have a really funny question to kick things off. Does anyone take this out of the workplace and use it for screening a date?
No, funnily enough, yes.
A new vertical for FAMA, right?
They do. Yeah, it's a little bit of a different kind of round peg, square hole sometimes, but
yeah.
Absolutely. And anytime somebody, I think, is trying to get a sense of kind of the unknown, right? You have a lot, particularly in the world of hiring, around like knowing a person's qualified, right? They have the degree, they have the skill set, maybe they passed the competency-based test. You had them run through during the onboarding process, but there's still this kind of bigger human question, kind of like what you were saying, at the top about culture of, is this the person who's going to come in and create a safe and welcoming workplace? Is it going to make all those people who are coming into my org, who are already there, are they going to want to stay because this new person coming in, right? So how are we finding people that aren't just, qualified, can they do the job, but are going to actually like champion, advance our culture forward and help, improve the concept of our brand in the eyes of our customers? And so much of that is outside of just, do you have the skill set, do you have the job? But, that whole, character perspective and who somebody really is really what we're trying to extract. So.
Awesome. I want to jump into this conversation because I think there's a lot of directions that we can go. When I last talked to you, Ben, we talked about some of the successful hiring processes and the importance of what your company really provides from a software standpoint. I want to dive into just maybe some strategic ways of hiring. Like, what are some best practices and how does that really align with what you're doing with your clients right now today?
Yeah, sure. So look, I think there's no, silver bullet when it comes to hiring a great person, right? There isn't a single piece of software or a tool, that you can use that's going to give you a guarantee. So I think we always sort of counsel kind of like an end-to-end analysis that also starts with companies having real conversations about what their culture is. Where they draw the line, right? How they think about what risk looks like to their business. And I think a lot of times, folks assume rather than ask in that scenario, right? As they say, okay, well, look, in our world, for example, we hear all the time, hey, look, we turned FAMA on, and then we saw that this person had made one misogynistic joke 4 years ago. We have one person in HR, that thinks that that's a problem, another one that doesn't, right? So how do we begin, defining that process, right? So a lot of it is sort of starting at the beginning and having those kind of what I'll call real conversations across teams between HR, talent acquisition, call it employee relations, heads of the business unit, et cetera, hiring managers, to kind of get that sense of, where are the lines on the field for our organization, which is a really, tough conversation to have, and one that often isn't resolved in, a 90-minute Zoom or meeting, in a boardroom, right? So, really for us, it's about getting kind of that baseline dialed in, but then looking at all elements of your kind of, talent funnel, right? Whether that's where you source talent from, how you build your organization, how you structure interview questions, how you look at competencies and skills versus, resume qualification, if you will. But of course, also, helping companies identify workplace misconduct and finding that signal, before it exists, right? And I think what we've seen with our tools is that, and even, I'd say across the sector, being at HR Tech, so many interesting new companies coming out, but AI has unlocked so much opportunity for the world of HR and talent acquisition, where, it's not automated processing, meaning it's not just something, and if we're going off topic, you guys can just tell me if you want to go back.
I love this. This is great. Yeah.
So if you think
I'm learning so much, yo. I'm like, just keep talking, man.
All right, you
I love this stuff.
You interrupt me if I.
I will. Don't worry about it. This is great. This is great.
Is that we're at this like really interesting moment of inflection where AI has unlocked so much opportunity for us, where when I say AI, I don't mean, I always say like Waze AI, right? Meaning tell us where to go, tell us how to get there, tell us where the left turn is, where the right turn is, and what time I'm going to be home. That's automated processing. That's the world of automated decision-making that, we're not really seeing as much of in HR and talent acquisition at scale. But what we are seeing are the ability to extract insights from massive streams of data that we've never seen before, right? To be able, for example, to, in a click, filter through a person's entire web presence and see, is there anything out there the person said was racist, hateful, maybe violent, is there any fraud, illegal drug use in their background? To be able to do that in an instant, right? As opposed to spending hours or days going through that process, it then puts the person in this unique position of saying, how do I use my uniquely human skill set to determine the implications and meaning behind the insights that tools like FAMA, is really providing. So, it's just this really interesting moment where that human factor here becomes so much more important. The human shared understanding of what makes our organization great. People always say, oh, AI bias. Well, how about human bias going off the rails, adopting the AI in the wrong way? So I would just say, like, the simple answer to the question, the strategic hiring process starts with your people, your teams, your organization, a shared understanding of what good looks like, and getting as real as you can about that.
Yeah, because it's interesting. A couple of things that you said brought up some interesting thoughts for me. You talked about risk assessment in terms of culture, because culture is a risk. I always talk about it's one of your greatest risks and also can be your greatest benefit, right? To have a strong culture, but being able to identify what that culture is and to have that framework in terms of what is acceptable to us, what does culture fit look like for us, right? And I know we always talk about culture add or culture enhancement, not just culture fit, but you don't want a culture misfit. You know what I'm saying? Because a culture misfit changes everything. The other thing that you said, other than the culture and how it's tied to risk for a company, which we talk about a lot with Culture of Good, is also the idea that AI has the opportunity to rehumanize aspects of our business, including how are we looking at the human side of the individual that we're hiring. And I think that's a really important thing. as you were talking, I was like, I want to just come work for a few days and just look into people's stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like, I want to do the CSI LA.
Yeah.
You know, I want to come out and check it out, man. Cause I think that's a part of it that's so fascinating to me, that we used to tell people early on when the internet came out, like, be careful what you post. Yeah. Be careful what you post. People are going to be looking at that and they're like, work, you know, they might get on your Facebook for a few minutes and look, but they're not going to really see what's going on, you know, but AI sees what's going on.
Yeah, I think that's the sort of unique piece of it, right? Is that this AI rush, and you know, we've been using AI for about 9 years or so, or since, you know, the founding of the company, right? And we not really Gen AI as much as more traditional natural language processing and image recognition, right? But to your point, like, you know, when you think about new people coming into your organization, we always encourage our clients to sort of with the metaphor analogy of a blanket, right? Of the fabrics that make up that blanket, that you start introducing new colors, new fibers, new different types of fabric into this beautiful design you've already created. You're going to lose the design. That's going to look all weird, right? That blanket suddenly doesn't look like what it used to look like. So, you know, and I don't mean that in the visual representation, of course, but more in like sort of how that manifests in how a company is structured and set up. And it's a really, you know, unique question to say, well, what if you could check everybody coming into your organization for acting intolerant or harassing towards others? What if you could get a bead on somebody acting misogynistic or promoting fraud, that sort of thing, right? And those are the questions that now companies are like, well, hell yeah, I want to know the answer to that question, right? Because forward-thinking HR leaders are now saying, look, good people are 54% more likely to leave in a toxic work environment, and I can actually control that for the first time. So it's almost like AI has kind of moved a risk that was just the cost of doing business literally 5 years ago into something that no longer has to be a cost of doing business. So it's a really interesting moment. And I love the term. I'm gonna steal rehumanizing, because that's great. But like, you know, it's this idea that the human piece is not just of who we're hiring, but the human connection of the people that are already there. So it's almost like this reinforcing flywheel in a way of like having to make sure that people who are making the decisions about who's coming in and what are we screening for, you know, that there's alignment across the organization on that sort of thing, right? Which can be a challenge sometimes for some organizations.
Is that consistent, like with companies, in terms of like what you would call toxic? Because is there a potential then for the human bias to be utilizing AI for that human bias, right? So like if I don't like somebody's political leaning, or they post, you know, about their politics, you know what I'm saying? Like how far do you take it where you would consult or advise those companies to say, okay, here's a list of what we would deem as toxic, right? Like you mentioned fraud. And is there kind of a set list that you suggest to companies, like these are candidate behaviors that you need to be mindful of?
Yeah, you know, as you might imagine, there is sort of a set of bright red lines for a wide range of businesses, right? You know, every company universally is saying, hey, look, we want to know about intolerance, threats, harassment. We want to know about fraud or illegal drug use, right? You know, maybe outside of cannabis, but we don't really care about cannabis. We want to know about, call it, you know, use of Schedule I drugs, cocaine, that kind of thing. So, you know, a lot of clients do turn on what we'll call kind of a core set of flags, because we don't score, we don't give you a thumbs up or a thumbs down, but we allow an end user to say, hey, if this exists, this person's digital identity, I want to know about it because I made that connection between potential risk and workplace impact. So, you know, that's really, I would say, where most customers start. But the power of the AI, of the technology itself, is that you can configure and customize what you want to screen for, right? So we've seen some really interesting use cases from the kind of standard stuff of like, you know, and this is true, like stopping a workplace shooter, right? Somebody who was threatening people at a company, right? And saying,
so this happened?
This happens this year, in the spring of this year, stopping a workplace shooter. We found last year a doctor, an executive doctor who was getting a job at a big hospital. And I think I told you this one, George, selling body parts on Twitter, like selling body
parts on Twitter.
This is a craziest shit in HR type moment.
Wow.
True story. But
executive
see, like some use cases, right? Like we did this big project with the National Health Service of the UK back in 2020 during the COVID-19 vaccine rollout, where they had to hire 25,000 people in a matter of weeks to give the jab in the UK. They were screening for people who were promoting anti-vaccine conspiracy theories online, who are trying to essentially sneak past all the guidelines, et cetera, and get in and kind of pursue their own agenda. And believe it or not, about 250 out of those 25,000 people were, posting things that were, the WHO, Bill Gates are all here to design this, vaccine to kill us all and control our brains. So, like true story, there's like that level of custom use of risk for your organization. So it's that configurability. And right now, for example, we have a ton of clients that are super interested in, anti-Semitic behavior online with the war in Israel and all that. So it's a really kind of wide-ranging gamut, but I would say kind of a core nucleus of things that people are always screening for.
Interesting.
Yeah. We talk about risk a lot, and I know that we have a lot of HR leaders and managers out there. Can we talk a little bit, because there's a challenge in that fear, even with AI, of what's legal, what are the legal aspects of these background checks, and the importance of knowing what we can do and what we should not do, right? So there's always that gray line of, we can do this, but should we do it? But also that legal aspect of what's allowed to be used and done when it comes to technologies such as what your company is doing.
Yeah, the compliance landscape here is something that you just have to get right as a vendor. It's not something that you can like paper over and, put a set of, an acronym on your website and say that you're compliant. It just doesn't work like that. So, a lot of what we do when it comes to using FAMA in a traditional kind of what I'll call background screening context, all falls under the FCRA, GDPR, and even, PIPEDA up in Canada, right? And so it's essentially, at a very high level, requirements on the vendor to make sure that you pursue maximum possible accuracy. That's finding the right person online, just given someone's resume, which is kind of a uniquely complex challenge, a little bit more difficult than it sounds, but finding a John Doe and a sea of John Does, you have to pursue kind of a level of maximum possible accuracy there. But the main thing is ensuring that, you are only looking at information that is job relevant, that again ties back to your company's definition of what risk looks like, right? And that's where the legislation really comes in, because you don't want people indiscriminately just looking at things that people are saying and doing and then making hiring decisions on that if it's not connected to the job at all. In the same way that, like, if I'm running a motor vehicle record check, somebody for a non-driving job, like, is that really that relevant whether or not I had a reckless driving 6 years ago, but I'm sitting at a desk all day? Same story, right? So you have to make sure that you're screening for the things that kind of map to workplace impact. But besides that, it's really making sure that you're excluding, looking at protected class information through this process. A lot of companies like do this themselves, right? They're like, oh, I'll just Google them.
Yeah,
I'll just look on Facebook, I'll check them out on Twitter, right?
Yeah.
And not only is that like complex to do, and because of some of the changes related to anti-scraping provisions, et cetera, like a lot of these social media sites make it difficult for a person to kind of go through a person's whole web presence. So there's that piece of it, but also more generally, just like if you do this thing yourself, like you see stuff you shouldn't see accidentally, right? You might see that someone's like disabled. You might see that they're a protected class, right? When you were really just trying to see, hey, did this person act hateful or violent?
Yeah.
Now, okay, well, I might see something I shouldn't have seen in that discovery process. So it's constantly, I would say, like, there's black and white answers to your questions and a way to do this right. And I would also point out that, like, day in and day out, people are using our reports and online data to make hiring decisions. And there's actually now case law supporting the use of it where there wasn't 8 or 9 years ago. It's kind of reflecting the proliferation of our online identity over the past decade. But at the end of the day, it's, as a vendor in our sector, like, you have to just stay ahead of it, and you have to be overly proactive and be a market leader when it comes to the changes that are coming, right? Because that's the first question. Sure, HR is going to be all about it, but when you take it to legal, when you take it to your folks in procurement, they're going to ask these questions. And if we as a service provider haven't proactively answered them for our customers, we're never going to see the light of day together. So, that's why we're launching this white paper. We just, released it a couple of weeks ago on sort of the AI Act in the EU and sort of the changing landscape related to artificial intelligence abroad. I'm sure you guys have seen a lot of that news coming out, but sort of getting down to the nitty and gritty of how to do this the right way. And I think if that's part of your brand promise in a sector like ours, you're going to be successful.
What percentage of what you do? I mean, I hear about like AI eventually creating or, being able to take on a role or, a position within a company like the hiring manager, like have AI, a large percentage of how we hire being done through just AI, right? And then you had brought up, I think before the show, just talking about like the personality side of who we're hiring and how, is this someone that's going to enhance our culture here and bring, bring what we're looking for in terms of not just, okay, they're great on social media, we don't have any issues with them, but also utilizing AI in terms of, discovering more about the human person, right? Like we talked about, like rehumanizing the business.
Yeah.
How is there a potential for companies to go in the direction of hiring just through HI in the future?
AI,
I mean, yeah.
I like HI. I'll take high.
HI. Human intelligence. It's where human resources keeps the human, but the resource is the AI.
I said HI. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. You're going to write that
put
down.
That on my LinkedIn. Ben Mones, human intelligence. But no, the short story, and just for the audience who wasn't in the break room with us before we started here, a lot of what we've done historically is sort of managing risk, as we've talked about. But what we started realizing was that AI and technology had unlocked all this new potential for us, where we could actually take the language that people are creating online in the same way that language might be used. Everyone's done like a Gallup Strengths Finder, a Myers-Briggs, a DISC, a Big Five assessment. You have to answer all these questions, provide a writing sample, et cetera, that you can actually extract the same sorts of insight using AI from language that people are creating online. So now we're launching a product called FAMA Instant Fit. It's coming out in the first quarter. We announced it at HR Tech this year. So not new news, hopefully, for too many who are listening. But if you're hearing about us for the first time, really what this is allows you to generate professional traits and competencies from a person's online language and actually begin to get a sense of how can I get the most out of this person when they start. As a manager, how can I get the most out of them, but also information for the candidate. Hey, based on the language we found online, here's how you can thrive in the role that you're walking into, right? So kind of these developmental action plans, which we think are going to give HR a head start on how to manage these people, right? On how to manage the folks that are coming in and to educate, internal hiring managers or the folks on that team who might be managing those folks, and even the, candidate who's coming in of saying, hey, here are a couple things, that we think you can really do to get the most out of this experience, and vice versa, from the employer to the candidate. So I say all of that, it's a really cool feature. And I'd love to, talk more about it, as in a follow-up or offline with anyone who's interested. But it gets down to that question of where is AI in the hiring process? And, I would push back on the idea that AI is ever going to take over the hiring process. I don't think that, and famous last words, right? There's like the narrator, little did he know, right?
Yeah,
but in any event,
we'll never have home computers.
Yeah.
Right.
But in any event, I think that the idea here with AI is that it has unlocked the potential to extract so much potential insight that, again, what humans are going to do is, I think, in a way, potentially have to upskill, if anything, so that they can, again, begin assessing the implications and the meaning and the impact of what the AI is telling us about a process or a workflow that we didn't know before. So I liken it as going from having a screwdriver to a power drill.
Yeah.
It's that simple, right? You still got to know how to build, the project, or, in my case, figure out how to, replace the latch on the gate at your house because it broke from slamming it too many times. But, I know how to do that with a power drill versus screwdriver, right? And I think that's that sort of level of change that we're going to start to see, is that, the companies that win in the world of talent acquisition and HR aren't just adding tools for the sake of adding tools, but are adding tools that advance their ability to really assess the implications and meaning of what are typically like super gray areas, and things that you might have thought in the past, I could never get a read on that before hiring them. I just have to wait until they come on board and see. Yeah. Well, now what if I could tell you, without a candidate ever doing anything and engaging with you and changing your candidate workflow, your candidate onboarding process, you can now get this unique trait and competency data. And that's the big unlock, is the change in the order of events and what you can get and when, based on AI. But you still got to make the decision. Like, AI is not going to absolve a hiring manager. And I don't think you'll ever hear TA be like, you know what? Like, the AI said it, let's do it. I don't think we're going to see that. But maybe, again, famous.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like, it's one of those things that once society becomes more trusting of AI, as it gets better and better, it's going to be interesting in that direction. We skipped over the doctor a little bit selling body parts. I can't.
He just,
I don't know, man. My ADHD is stuck on this guy selling body parts on Twitter. I'm not sure how that works.
Yeah, I mean,
I can't even drop ship. I can't even figure out how to drop ship stuff on Twitter. Like, how in the world? Is that the craziest thing what is that it? Like, is that the peak of, like, this guy's probably not going to get hired because he's selling kidneys?
I mean, definitely one of the top 5 enshrined in the FAMA Hall of Fame of weird stuff that's happened. But no, every day we see the kind of run-of-the-mill intolerance, hate speech, threats, and I think it's that concept of people, again, trying to get a sense of who this person, how they're going to act around employees and customers when they come on board. But yeah, the selling body parts. I mean, the workplace shooter thing was probably a lot more.
Yeah,
because it prevented something that we are all seeking to prevent in this world, which is hurt and pain and the death of others. So that was a really big moment for us to know that, like, what we're doing has a tangible impact. And I would say, we've known it was tangible because, of just people saying, hey, look, wow, if I didn't see this, we brought this guy on board, would have been a huge problem for us, downstream. But stories like that, we've seen other stuff of, like, strange, news stories about people and, people who, sell, in the world of healthcare, there's been a lot of, like, interestingly enough, sale of like, drugs from hospital medicine cabinets on social media and stuff like that. So definitely some funky stuff in the world of healthcare, but typically, it's your standard, like, executive had a lawsuit against him because of creating a boys club culture in the past. And, that sort of thing that you never hear about because it doesn't come up on a standard background check, but does come up if you do a really deep dive into a person's online persona.
Is that within that, do they have to sign off? Like, do they apply for the job and then that's kind of like, they kind of open up, or is it just, you can just look into someone without them actually, cause like I would imagine the shooter wouldn't have said, yeah, look into me, or like the doctor, that's right. Probably a different scenario because they're not looking to get hired somewhere, correct?
Well, I'll tell you, like, everyone who signs or who we run a check on that's going to be used as a hiring purpose, you get a consent form, right? So anytime we're looking at risk, or anything that might be considered what they call in the sort of letter of the law, adverse information about people that's going to be used in a hiring, firing, credit, benefits granting decision, the candidate has to have, or the employee, if it's monitoring, has to have a consent form signed, and also has to receive a copy of the report before they're actually, that adverse information is then acted upon, and that person is then, decisioned out of a role, for example. So everyone signs a consent form. And when I started the company, I didn't come out of, HR or talent acquisition, before I started FAMA because I hired a guy who looked great on paper and ended up like sexually harassing one of our salespeople at the company, and horrible experience for this woman, for the business in general. And we saw after the fact all this like misogynistic, pejorative content on his social media that had we seen it, we never would have brought this guy on board. So I had to learn all this stuff. Like I didn't know anything. I actually thought background checks were stored in some underground Minority Report database, like beneath the Pentagon.
Right.
That's like not how it works at all. So anyway, I came in as a novice into the industry, and I thought, you know, when I learned about the FCRA, I was like, well, if people are consenting to this, aren't they just gonna like go delete all the racist stuff they've said? Aren't they just gonna make all their stuff private? Same thing with the doctor, maybe somebody who's like promoting, you know, violence online, you know, you would think they would hide that behavior, right? But what's been really interesting from a moral psychology standpoint, and, you know, again, this is like more just my armchair observation here. But that, you know, people who are truly, you know, problematic, who have normalized these really problematic, you know, points of view, don't think there's anything wrong with it, right?
Right. They've had to justify it so many times in their head that it's gotten to a point where it's justified.
Yeah, it's normalized, right? And it's kind of like reptile brain, you know, kicking into action, right? And just the consistency maybe of how you were raised, where you came up, you know, and a lot of times, you know, we'll see with especially younger employees, maybe they grew up in a town, you know, that was all white people, and, you know, and it was a town of 200 and, you know, 2,500 people or something, and they said things that were stereotyped or racist, and they maybe just didn't know that from how they were raised, right? And so a lot of times companies will say, hey, look, like this stuff is not appropriate here. And in those moments, people are like, oh shit, like I didn't even know that. I didn't even know that was inappropriate, right? And so sometimes you'll see people just like intervene with candidates through the process using our information, as opposed to just hiring them, because sometimes that course correction, if you ever read like, the concept of nudging, right? Of just nudging somebody back in, you know, you can oftentimes hopefully avoid the long-term damage.
It's really interesting.
Yeah, I always think of, as I'm listening to y'all talk, I'm up here thinking, I've seen so many people lie to themselves so many times that they like, if you lie to yourself, you repeat that lie over and over.
Like you and I can sing.
Yeah, like I can sing. Like eventually you're going to believe that lie. If you tell yourself over and over, hey, that there's no problem here, this is good, then you'll start to live that. And then I think of some of the stories that Ben has shared with us, and I'm interested, Ben, if you can share another, the craziest, we got a segment that we usually do called Craziest Shit in HR. If you got one more story or case study that's kind of a testimonial that y'all were able to do, I want you to gather that one real quick. But I think that common sense sometimes is just not common in a lot of people. When they think of social media, it's a release, right? When they go home, they just want to release their stress about their job, about their feelings about, you know, whether it's political
people talk about their people talk about their job all the time. Like I'm on anti-work as a subreddit all the time, you know, and you can tell like people are talking about it, you know, like,
and so it's a release. Some people see social media as this is me, and I can leave job where job is. And this is just a reality that the power of your words like still live.
Yeah.
Right. You got to be careful with even false threats and things of that nature. But I want to, Ben, do you have another story you can share with us? And if so, just give me a thumbs up. All right. Okay. Here we go. Go ahead and play the intro.
All right, here we go. This is the craziest shit in HR. There you go. Sorry about that, Ben. We're like
little guys played that because I wasn't sure what craziest shit in HR.
I'm still 12 years old. So.
I'm into it. Look, I mean, the stories I shared, I think, are some of the more extreme examples. But you know, I'll tell a craziest shit in HR story that has a good ending to it. So, you know, a couple of years ago, and this was 2018 or so, there was a nurse at the Cleveland Clinic named Laura Collab, who had posted on social media, I'm going to give Jews the wrong medicine, and all this other anti-Semitic stuff of basically threatening to, you know, hurt and kill Jews at the Cleveland Clinic, right? And you guys know Cleveland Clinic is one of the most visible, significant hospitals, not just in the United States, but in the world, and carries like, a lot of cancer research and very forward thinking innovation around changing the way that we live our lives. I have family members and friends who've gone to CCF to get, specialized treatment. Right. And so there was this whole news story, this big blow up on the Cleveland Plain Dealer, and this site called Canary Mission kind of outed her, right, and found this stuff. And so, Cleveland Clinic came to us and essentially said, hey, look, like, we had this problem, we need to solve it. And so what they did was they turned on FAMA for their entire organization, like for the entire itself. Everybody who got a badge for 3 to 5 years, they examined the ways that they source talent, how they asked interview questions, right? What they sort of looked at before we even got to the point where you'd run a FAMA check. And, they stopped the issue. That was a really like powerful, thing that happened of a company that, I've got a ton of respect and admiration for, that had this like really visible brand issue. And instead of just like papering over it, and just saying, it happened, right? Like, they took action, turned FAMA on, and, eviscerated that problem. And that's why I always say, it's like, just like business is like life. We can't prevent bad shit from happening.
Right.
It's just the way it is. There are ups and there are downs. You're never going to find yourself in business or in life without problems. There's always going to be something going on, and life is all about, in my mind, problem solving and trying to do it in the best and easiest way possible, and find a way to be happy. And, I think companies have to realize that it's okay to be imperfect, and that crazy shit is going to happen. And, these stories are going to get told on podcasts, right? But it's all about how you like bounce back, and
what do you do about it, right?
Yeah. Who cares if we fail? Who cares if we mess up? Sure, we want to try to avoid that at all costs, but where we build connection, where we build culture, where we build relationships, is in those hard times, is in facing that adversity together and doing something about it. So that's what I would leave you with as a more maybe happy version of.
Yeah, it's not everything's bad, right? Like, you do a background check. Have there ever been a positive aside from that, but also not as an outcome, but are there any stories like, oh, we looked into someone and we didn't realize how great they were?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It can't always be like every time we look into someone. I mean, when George came on, I noticed that he twerked a lot on TikTok, but I like that. That's why I hired him.
That's the burner account.
That's the burner account.
Supposed to find out.
That was the whole reason I hired him.
That was George's burner account. You weren't supposed to say.
Exactly.
Burner account that they
but
still
it worked out. Yeah, I appreciate it. But are there moments where a company says, well, this actually is better than what we thought?
Yeah, I think a lot of times, right? And that's sort of where our next product suite is going, is this concept of like not just examining risk, but the other side of that risk, right? And how can we begin construing and identifying the good things about people, right? The competencies that they're bringing to the table. So we sort of had to start with risk management, because that was the burning problem, as it were, right? But as we found customers that got comfortable using this type of data, so, okay, well, what else can we do with it, right? And so that's where, this new product concept kind of came to fruition and will be on the market next year. So I think we'll start to see a lot more clients who are using us for finding the good stuff that's out there.
Yeah, and we talk about bringing your soul to work all the time and crafting your passion into what you do every day. So being able to, like, would we be able to say, all right, this candidate, these are the hobbies, this is what makes this candidate tick. Those type of things as well, like because once I learn more about the individual, then I can help them, like you mentioned, Ben, like flourish and curate a experience and an environment where they can actually flourish at work.
Yeah. So what I would say is that there is that idea and concept, but extended a little bit deeper into the makeup of who a person is. And again, like, being able to break down language in the same way that ChatGPT can break down text, reorganize it, and make it look like a person is talking back to you. You can get to the essence, to the meaning, the consistency in the way that people structure their own text online to figure out things like self-assurance, confidence, rigorousness, right? Being able to figure out if someone is a coach or a player, right? Those are things that you can actually do to assess professional competencies about how people work and the things that motivate them to help, them get the most out of the experience and you get the most out of them. So it's even going a level deeper than, because today, you could just run what we call kind of topic analysis on a person's web presence. And there's a lot of off the shelf stuff that you could do just by, taking your own Twitter account and copying and pasting some tweets and putting it into a topic modeling algorithm. But we're trying to go deeper than that. What we're trying to say is that there are innately human factors at the center of our language online, and we want to try to bring that out to the world, because for too long our online identities have just been used to sell us shit. My dad showed for Thanksgiving wearing these weird, my dad's a big Japanophile. He was wearing these weird Japanese capri pants or something like that.
Yeah.
That were kind of long. I was like, where did you get those pants? And he was like, Instagram. So if IG can know that my dad is a Japanophile and sell him some cool pants, why can't a hiring manager use that same sort of data to make an inference about, a person's working style or the tendencies and factors that are going to make them a great person? So
yeah, that's wild.
Yeah. As we get to the final 10 minutes or so of the podcast, I want to reconnect the conversation with what I found was really important when looking into FAMA and how you make the hiring process really easy. When we did a research study and we're lining it up the last time we talked, and one of the things that I asked that I've been intrigued about since our conversations then is how important is it to employees, not employers? Because a lot of time in the interview process, employers will say, hey, this is our mission, this is our values, and it never really cross promotes what the other person thinks. What we found in our research is that employees are now asking that question.
Yeah. What
are your company values? Because I want to make sure that they align with my personal values. And there's some connection there on how important workplace culture aligns with the personal values of an employee. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I feel like there are some stories there and connections as you are working with your clients. We talked about the values and how culture has been impacted and engagements impacted based on hiring the right people. And then that connection is company values aligning with employees' personal values. Can you share a little bit about that and some testimonial?
Yeah, and I think it goes back to some of what we were talking about at the beginning of the conversation, which is this idea of connection and belonging, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. What's that about? You guys see that little thumbs down there?
No.
That was strange. In any event,
somebody gave you a thumbs down.
Yeah.
Well, whoever did that, we need you to look into that after the podcast, Ben, if you could. We'll out them next week.
I think it's a weird Zoom reaction. It might be in my camera. It happens from time to time. I do some strange gesture and it pops.
They don't like it.
A little.
Oh, you know what? I clapped the other day on Zoom, and I had for somebody, I was like, "Yay, we should try it." Well, we're not on Zoom now, but on Zoom, I clapped. And all these fireworks went off automatically. I hadn't. Not on StreamYard.
Zoom right now, and something just happened. So now, I'm all types of confused. But
it's your
I'm
software.
Sure you're going to look into it for sure.
We'll get right on it. We'll get the very best people. No one is going to look into it. But the idea is I think you're spot on, George. People are asking those questions. They have a lot of candidates, a lot of job seekers. There's been so much change in not just the labor market, but our definition of work over the past, call it 3 years now, since the pandemic started, right? Where we have seen a fundamental rethinking of everything from work from home, hybrid work, remote work, the explosion and downfall of tech hiring and the tech industry, right? The GameStop stock market all the way to where we are today, and the stock market seemingly doing way better for some reason, even though we're in this crazy inflation cycle, carried by 7 different companies. In any event, we're at this point of inflection, I think, where job seekers and employees of companies have now started to ask that question of wait a sec, like I worked from home, I worked at work, and now my life is basically work. Is I think what a lot of folks have realized, especially like millennials, Gen Z, it's like, oh shit, like I'm going to spend my entire life
a third of it.
Right. You know, I'm going to spend most of my living hours at work. And so when it comes to where do I want to spend that time, I think what the pandemic has opened up for a lot of job seekers and employees is like that breakdown between the things that we consider in our personal life and the things that we consider in our professional life as being important, right? Where there's a lot of cross-pollination now where I think people are starting to ask, like, I'm going to spend a lot of time here. I want to spend it just like I do with my friends, with people where I feel that sense of connection, where I feel that sense of belonging, right? And that can be different for a lot of people, right? And I think it's, you know, less of putting a fancy logo on your resume at this point and being in a place where you feel that connection, you feel that belonging. And I think that breakdown between the workplace and home that the pandemic kind of brought in started to lead us as, you know, job seekers and employees to answer, like ask ourselves that question, get it answered of like, well, do I really feel that connection here? And what are the values of this organization? Because shit, like I'm going to dedicate my life to this. I'm going to be doing it at home with my significant other, you know, they're going to be there too. And I have this one single life, you know, that I'm leading. I want to make sure that it's, you know, contiguous and a single whole as opposed to work and home.
Yeah.
Which I think is the big difference is like that work and home concept.
Yeah.
It's now eviscerated. I think
it's just life.
It's life.
What was I going to ask? I was thinking about this. So in this same vein, then is there a future other than being able to go on like Glassdoor? Mm-hmm. So when George is talking about how we're interviewing the culture, we're interviewing the leader and the boss and the manager, is there a potential for me to be able to do a background check on the manager that's hiring me?
First off, I love that concept and idea because Glassdoor, while it does have some controls to prevent like the management of your Glassdoor profile, if you will, a lot of companies do like manage their Glassdoor profile.
Yeah, you can pay to clean that up.
You can just pay to manage.
Pay to play, yeah.
Right. And, you know, comparably, there are a few other sites out there, you know, that try to get you unbiased reviews. Interestingly enough, for big companies, we actually see a lot of companies that turn to Reddit. In the world of academia, you have like Rate My Professor, which now includes like some admins as well. But again, that's all like user submissions, right? So there's no real validation of kind of truth, if you will, on some of those reports or summaries, right? But we have always toyed with that idea of, you know, how do you deliver to a job candidate? And the unfortunate reality is in a way that the employer is okay with.
Yeah, right. It's interesting because we're okay with doing it for the potential hire. Right. But once somebody's hired, I mean, the Cleveland Clinic did it, right? So they ran it through their entire workforce. Is that right?
Yeah.
So that would be one way of doing it, is hiring you and FAMA to be able to unlock that throughout the entire organization. Rather than just one person. I would understand it was like, we got to run a report on you before we hire this candidate. The candidate requested it.
I think there's like a incentive question there, right? Of like, if a business believes that there's a not just, you know, business incentive, but a financial incentive for them to spend money to attract better quality candidates, and that was validated, that was true, then I think you'd see companies sign up for it. But we've always said, you know, we talk about this professional traits and competencies. Well, what if you could get a report card as a candidate from your entire organization that you might be joining about the managers that you're going to be working for and what their styles are like, right?
Right, exactly.
It's that kind of like, you know, thing that we thought was impossible that is now possible with AI. Whether or not companies adopt it, I think is a different story. Because the incentive structure is the real challenge, I think, in an equation like that. Just speaking, you know, truth to fact here, it's one of these things that like you could do it, but why would an employer do that if it could?
It could be a trust builder. An employer would do it if I was a candidate and I went onto a site and I saw that they were certified through FAMA. and knowing that what I would get as a candidate going into that position is, maybe it's not a report of my manager's social media for the last 20 years, but it could be, what, to your point, more the rehumanizing side of the business, and knowing my manager's values and knowing their language and knowing, is this somebody I actually want to work for? Like I would consider that a certification for an organization to be pretty valuable.
I love that. I mean, we've talked about that at length over the years at FAMA, of just trying to promote a concept and idea, because, you know, for us, it would allow us to get into like talent acquisition and talent sourcing, right? And being able to imagine going on Indeed and not just seeing a job description, but seeing like a real company health card, that, which I think was the original spirit of like Glassdoor and comparative some of these other rating sites, but have unfortunately fallen to favor, I would just say, the shareholder value, which is
Glassdoor is like all your exes having an opportunity to talk about how great of a boyfriend or girlfriend you were. Like, it's not going to be good. You know what I'm saying?
Nobody goes on Yelp because they have like a good lunch, but they either had a really bad one or a really good one, and so that's kind of what you pick up.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I want to ask a couple of questions. We got a couple of questions in the audience, and because of your power and capabilities, we had somebody that wanted to admit that it was them. So shout out to Lamont. Lamont said, laughing out loud, no, that was an accident. His pencil hit the keyboard. My fault, disregard the thumbs down.
See, sometimes it's a pencil, right? See?
That was a new one. I've never heard of a pencil having that much power, Lamont. No,
Lamont, hey, no matter what excuse you have, Lamont, I never met you, but I love you, man. Thank you so much.
Oh, man.
That's great.
So
hey, Lamont, we thank you for always support. He's one of our faithful listeners.
What's up, dude? What's up?
They're out there. Next question for you, Ben. How do you separate, and I think you touched a little bit on this already, but if you can, how do you separate hate speech or misinformation, disinformation from a social media screening? People can, be free to talk about religion, political beliefs on social media, and keep their personal life out of the workplace. Can you answer that for us?
Great question, and spot on. You are absolutely, and people regularly talk about, as I'm sure y'all know, their political views or their religious views online, which has no bearing on employment. And in the same way that if a hiring manager said, hey, Ben mentioned that he was celebrating Hanukkah in the job interview, let's not hire him. That would be, again, totally illegal, totally inappropriate, and a massive lawsuit. In the same way that if I took that from a person's online presence and then used that not to hire them, again, totally illegal. You can't do it. So FAMA out of the box, the way we protect against that is that there are certain things that you can't flag for, certain flags you can turn on or off. And for example, like there are some companies out there that flag for like political expression or political points of view. We don't do that. That's a protected class. That's something that you should not be using. You should not be seeing. So the short story, Andre, is that there's filtering within our application that will only flag for user review information that is job relevant or maps to one of the flags that we've set up. And we use that a concept called natural language processing and image recognition to capture that nuance of someone saying something like, hey, I'm going to kill my boss this weekend versus, my team with my boss, we're going to kill it this weekend on this project.
Gotcha.
Like two very different statements that you want to find the former, not the latter. And that's what we do in a way, through our techniques with filtering and flagging. But happy to chat more, Andre, if you want to, go a little deeper on that.
It's interesting.
Awesome. We'll let the pencil falling guy have another question. And this maybe for Ryan, whichever you want to take this. How do you present and evaluate the work-life balance question during the initial interview process of potential hires, especially if we want them to be honest and comfortable to share idea and desires?
Ryan, you want to take that, or you want me to?
How do you present and evaluate the work-life balance question during the initial interview process of potential hires, especially when you want them to be honest and comfortable? That's a tricky one because our people I think of it as we're trying to get a job many times. It's like meeting someone for the first time. As you're starting to date them, they're putting their best foot forward. And a lot of times there's a lot of pressure within the workplace to present yourself as someone that is able to be accessible, that if I get an email later in the day and it's required that I reply to it, but I'm at home, that I'm still there. I'm showing myself to be accessible. I'm showing myself to be available, to be able to be at work even when I'm at home. Those type of things really go far with a lot of employers. And so to be able to identify that on a human scale without AI requires us to have those candid conversations, and that's going to come through building trust. So it's easier, I think, when we know the candidate ahead of time, we're familiar with them, they know us, because there's a level of trust that's built. I don't know how you would fully know whether someone's being honest or not without a FAMA, and I'm not really sure how you identify that within the context of AI. Right. How much time does this person spend at home? Does it? Yeah, I think as AI, as this younger generation is growing up, AI is going to grow up with them. Yeah. And so AI is going to know when you went to the hospital, what medicines you take, what vitamins. It's going to know how for you to be the healthiest that you can be. It's going to know whether you're replying to emails in the evening, whether you shut your phone off. Eventually, it's going to grow up with this next generation and be able to identify those things. I'm not sure. Is there a way now currently to be able to identify whether that harmony or that work-life balance is a part of that person's life currently?
Using technology, I mean, you could come up with some like Scotch tape, bubble gum, and pick up sticks way to do it, maybe. But I would just say, like, my recommendation, and this is more just from hiring people at my company and in previous jobs, but just be declarative about what your position is. Like, open up the door for that person to have that candid conversation, which can be something to the effect of like, hey, look, like, one of the things at our company you could say is like, we really need you to be on 9 to 5. Like, we can't have you not on 9 to 5 because of the role that you're in. Maybe it's customer requirements or an element of the role itself that requires that person to be in a seat at a certain time. Or maybe you have a job where you're like, hey, we got unlimited, like FAMA, we have an unlimited, vacation policy here. We're results oriented, right? And, work-life balance for us is super important. So, we'll tell folks like, this is the way that we work at FAMA. And are you comfortable with that? And it's, I think, more reliant on you as a hiring manager or in that workflow, establishing that candor and that transparency that you might not have otherwise had.
And that goes pretty far to building that trust, right? Being candid and upfront and saying, this is how we run things around here. Yeah. Does this work for you? Yeah.
Totally.
And all of a sudden there's a flood of new candidates going to FAMA for job interviews because unlimited vacation. Just remember what they do.
We have that.
Check
too.
Your background.
I mean, you don't ever have to say, do I need some PTO?
Yeah.
Just go take it.
Yeah. It's true.
But get your shit done.
GSD. The importance of business is to stay in business.
Yeah.
It's important. Hey, Ben, is there anything exciting going on in 2024 as we wrap up? What's some exciting things that you may have planned for next year that you're looking forward to? And then can you share with us and the audience where people can find more about yourself and your company?
Yeah, we we're honored actually to receive award from Nucleus Research of a hot company to watch in 2024, right alongside companies like OpenAI and Dataiku and DBT Labs. So really excited about what's coming. I think a lot of the reason we received that recognition was because of some of the ways that we are pushing the limits on what identifying workplace misconduct could mean, and the ways that, we're launching some of these products around professional and psychometric assessments drawn from online language. So a lot of innovation that's coming. We are absolutely, I would say pushing the limits on what we thought was possible when it comes to using online personas for talent acquisition and candidate screening more generally. So love to chat with you more about it. Come to our website, fama.io, fill out a contact form. There it is, fama.io. Come check us out. Follow me on LinkedIn, send me a connection request. I try to, accept a lot of people who aren't selling me stuff. So if you want to come hang and get in the community, join us on LinkedIn, or, just come to our website. We have a great newsletter we put out every month. So would be cool.
That's awesome, Ben. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so intrigued by this. Now I'm down, like I have about 5 different rabbit holes. I'm going to go do some research on AI around what we got going on here. I've just learned so much today. Really interesting stuff.
Yeah, really appreciate you guys having me on, and thanks again for taking the time and letting me share this hour with you and your audience. It was great.
For sure.
Appreciate it. Well, it was good to have Ben on, and I've already known a little bit about it. Awesome team. He's got a great team. Nicole, shout out to Nicole, that's on his team. She's awesome. I know she's not feeling well this week, and so sending some good energy and vibes
and good energy, yo,
to your way.
Yeah,
Ryan, what are your thoughts? I've known about FAMA now. I've been sharing a lot about them with you and some of our team. What's your initial thoughts on what Ben and his company is doing out there?
This is the future, right? Yeah. To be able to, I'm fascinated personally by how AI rehumanizes work.
Yeah.
And I think that's the conversation that we need to be having, and we need to be asking those questions. How do we continue to rehumanize? Because, technology has a mind of its own, and it's just going to continue to advance in terms of innovation and, the future. As we know, most jobs in the next 5 to 8 years don't exist currently right now. Right. Yeah. So we have the reality of AI to rehumanize and to create an experience within work that I think is going to be extremely special. And I'm really happy that there are people like Ben that have a good heart and have the ability to be able to say and to insist on, as we continue to advance in technology, that we also advance in our humanity. And yeah. I think that's the piece of it that I'm most excited about.
Awesome. Yeah. So once again, you can check out FAMA, www.fama.io for all things. A great company organization, especially for those in TA and hiring managers. If you're looking for some software, you can definitely connect there as well. Appreciate Culture Good powering us up every week.
Yeah.
And we got some special news. We didn't share. We did change.
We changed the dates of our 2-day certification. Yeah. That'll be February 27th and 28th. That's a Tuesday and Wednesday, I believe.
Yep.
February 27th and 28th. So our early bird pricing on the 2-day, this is a culture certification. So if you are a champion of culture, you can now get certified in that and build your network, also build your tools and expertise in terms of how to grow a culture of good within your business. So reach out to us on cultureofgood.com to learn more about that. And as always, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you back next week on
Champion Your Culture.
Hi, friends. Thanks for joining us on Champion Your Culture podcast today.
We're so excited that you're here and want to invite you to connect with us. You can watch the show weekly on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, or LinkedIn, and listen anywhere you get podcasts.
Subscribe today to get new relevant content each week on how to champion yourself and your team. Thanks again for listening to Champion Your Culture.